Hey, hello. Oh, look at that. Two wrong lengths. Don't like that. How are you? Good to speak to you all again this week. It's Friday. It's a snowy Friday outside. Very snowy here in Essex. Reminds me that it's beginning of December and don't feel like I'm probably going to get outside to sit in the garden and drink a nice bottle of Sol for some time. But never mind. Three things this week of importance. Not that there's been more than three things, but just try and keep to three, because otherwise these videos will get to sort of 30 minutes long and no one wants to watch me for 5, let alone 30. Been a great week, a really busy week. One major focus this week was what I was talking about last week, is when we released the evidence base for the GC local plan. So we've been running a series of workshops this week, and they will continue into next week. We had a public webinar as well on that one this week on Wednesday evening. Went well, really. I think it's challenging under the current circumstances to be doing things like this digitally. I think the consultation stuff, needs a mix. I think you need a mix of face-to-face and digital. I think digital is really helpful, but I'm pretty sure that we've discovered, over this year, that there are limitations to its ability to be able to really get down to some of the nitty-gritty. But I think that we've learned a lot from those first 3 webinars to take into next week's 3 webinars. We did get some really good dialogue. We got some really good questions. I think it is, when you're trying to keep these webinars to kind of 2 hours, which is probably an acceptable time for anybody to be concentrating for and having to stare at a screen, then you do have to kind of steam through things a little bit, or kind of really reduce stuff, which is tricky, and that kind of highlights that challenge of how we improve participation in planning and economic development, because it's complex information. It's complex, lots and lots of it, lots of time to digest it, lots of time to read stuff, and people don't always have the luxury of time. So I think that is a challenge. You can help that by simplifying through visuals and images and things, but sometimes that's quite reductive and fails to completely describe complex interactions that we do have in planning. But it's a live and learn, and as long as we reiterate and rethink and improve, then I think that we can only do so much with that. It's been some interesting stuff coming out of it, and there's been a really, really interesting couple of weeks with seeing those evidence bases, seeing the conversations that are happening around them, and no doubt we'll have some more next week. I'll ping the link to the public webinar in the blog. Other thing this week was around the Planners Forum that I went to for London Stansted Cambridge Consortium corridor work. Another big corridor for us, economic corridor. Obviously get a lot of talk about Oxcam, but LSCC is equally as important. Very well established, that London kind of to Cambridge up the kind of along the M11, that corridor area, but it encounters a lot of districts and councils across that area. Really started to talk around, one of the conversations we had around was a bit of a think piece around the Bill Grimsey work, which was around high streets, which he done an addendum to this year in post-COVID. Started to think about, what that means. We've gone from an acceleration from 2020 to 2030 in about 3 months, as somebody said in the session, and that's absolutely true. And when we talk about consumer behaviours, i.e. going into towns and buying stuff from shops, I think the bigger problem, or the bigger challenge, will be the labour market shifts. Those people who aren't travelling into those areas for work anymore because, like me, they're sat here at home. They might be stimulating their local economy, and that may well make a real difference on the ground to those smaller, kind of polycentric local communities. So lots to take in there, lots to think about. And that was a good meeting. It was good to see John McGill, who manages that, who looks after the LSCC, and have some conversations with some of the planners and economic development professionals along that area, start to tease out those issues. One thing I didn't mention last week was something I'm very proud of, is that I've been elected to the board of the Institute for Economic Development, which is the IED, for those of you who know it. I'm very proud to be on the board. I got elected, I think, at the beginning of November. I'm a member, obviously. And I'm really looking forward to working in a non-exec role there, and helping to drive that forward. It's a really important time, and they've been on a really swift journey. I think they've really moved leaps and bounds in the last couple of years, and had a chat this morning with Richard Cairns, who's one of the non-exec directors on that board. He got in contact with me after I was elected onto the board. Really nice to chat to him, and I'm super engaged by what he had to say and what his opinions were of what we thought we could be doing in that space. Because I think the one thing that we spoke about is that economic development is intrinsic in almost everything in local government. So it's not just for those kind of ED professionals. I don't know why I do that with my hands. Those ED professionals, it's in social care, it's in communities team, planning, everything. So very exciting. So hope you have a lovely weekend. If you got snow, go play in it. If you didn't, then you're probably lucky anyway and sit in front of your fire. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you next week.